In the Dnieper direction in the Kherson region, Russian occupiers are trying to push the Ukrainian Armed Forces away from the Antonov bridges near Kherson and seize islands in the Dnieper Delta. This was reported on air by Vladislav Voloshin, a representative of the Defense Forces of the south of Ukraine. According to him, in the south, the enemy has intensified its aviation and increased the number of drone strikes. In addition, the enemy is not reducing the number of assault actions and artillery shelling on the positions of the Ukrainian Defense Forces and settlements adjacent to the line of combat contact. In particular, in the Dnieper direction, the enemy is regrouping, conducting logistical, evacuation and reconnaissance activities to continue attempts to capture the Dnieper Island zone. According to Voloshin, in the Kherson region, the enemy has concentrated assault groups at several points to conduct forcing actions with small groups of infantry. The enemy is trying to push our defenders away from the Antonov bridges. It is also trying to take control of several islands in the south of the island zone. In particular, these are Zabich, Nestriga, Gozuliski. There, the enemy wants to take some bridgehead and then gradually island by island, strait by strait, carry out a landing on the right bank, Voloshin explained. He added that, as for now, all these attempts are futile. Judging by the number of forces and resources that the enemy has concentrated there, they are quite sufficient for such assault operations. At the same time, according to Voloshin, they are not enough for a classic crossing of the Dnieper. However, the enemy will constantly act actively there, constantly maintain activity thanks to the fact that it has gathered the appropriate number of forces there, the military man explained. In the Novopavlovsk direction, the enemy carried out strikes on the positions of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and populated areas, in particular with guided aerial bombs. In just one day, in the Novopavlovsk direction, the Defense Forces repelled 14 attacks on the positions of our troops near Novopol, Bogatyr, Svobodnoy Pole, Novosyolka and Zeleny Pole. As the speaker explained, the enemy continues active operations there. In the Gulyai-Polye direction, the enemy has resumed assault operations, is launching massive airstrikes on several populated areas and is now attempting to attack in the Krasnoy area. One assault was unsuccessful, but the enemy's airstrikes have increased significantly in this direction. Unguided missiles are being used to strike Krasnoy, Gulyai-Pole and several other populated areas. The situation is no less difficult in the Orekov direction, where the enemy used both aviation and drones. Our defenders successfully repelled 2 attacks there in the area of Novoandreevka and Novodanilovka, the speaker said. In these areas, the enemy is sticking to assaults by small groups of infantry. Such attacks are preceded by massive shelling of the Ukrainian Armed Forces positions. As Voloshin explained, the Russians are launching massive strikes from various weapons on the corresponding Ukrainian structures and buildings. Then, under the cover of electronic warfare, drones and aviation, enemy infantry groups of up to 7 people are sent to assault. For fast movement, they use motorcycles, one of which is equipped with electronic warfare equipment.
U.S. President Donald Trump is delivering his first military commencement address since returning to office. According to Associated Press, the Republican president is set to speak to West Point's graduating class on Saturday morning. Trump gave the commencement address at West Point in 2020, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. The president urged graduating cadets to never forget the soldiers who fought a war over slavery during his remarks, which came as the nation was reckoning with its history on race after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Trump also paid tribute to the military academy's history and its famed graduates, including Douglas MacArthur and Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Russia is deploying nuclear-tipped air-to-air missiles for the first time since the Cold War. The deployment comes amid the Russian regime's invasion of Ukraine and unprecedented levels of tension between Russia and Western countries. This is reported by Newsweek, citing a report published by the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency. It is noted that the missiles resemble the weapons that the Soviet Union had during the Cold War, but the new version is adapted for use by the latest Russian combat aircraft. We may be talking about a special version of the R-37 aircraft missile, the R-37M, which can be carried by the MiG-31BM, Su-30SM, Su-35 and possibly the Su-57. While nuclear-capable air-to-air missiles were part of the Soviet Union's arsenal during the Cold War, little is known about their current status within the Russian aerospace forces, making the disclosure all the more intriguing. The article says, the deployment of such weapons has been known since at least 2018, wrote Hans Christensen, director of the Nuclear Information Project at the think tank Federation of American Scientists, FAS, but he said the weapons had magically disappeared from U.S. Defense Department publications about Russia's nuclear arsenal all these years. Air-to-air missiles emerged at a time when squadrons of heavy strategic bombers carrying nuclear warheads were considered among other means of delivering nuclear weapons to a potential enemy's territory. Such missiles were intended to destroy bomber formations in the air. The advent of intercontinental ballistic missiles significantly reduced the relevance of air-to-air nuclear missiles, and the development of air defense led to the disappearance of the very idea that a formation of strategic bombers could bomb anything. The missiles themselves also changed, from huge ground-based air defense missiles to attempts to install nuclear warheads on small aircraft missiles. Not having to get within range of a missile's high explosive warhead to shoot down a target could be seen as an advantage in the modern era, perhaps against stealth aircraft that can be detected but are difficult to pin down, especially by the missile's small radar during its terminal attack phase. Another possibility is that nuclear-armed air-to-air missiles could be used to counter drone swarms or waves of cruise missiles. The publication notes, it should be noted that the so-called nuclear umbrella is being actively discussed in Europe due to Russian President Vladimir Putin's regular nuclear threats. However, former Lithuanian President Dalia Grybauskaitė calls for not giving into panic over Russia's nuclear threats.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Thursday that timing for a second round of peace talks with Ukraine hasn't been determined yet. According to Associated Press, speaking at a conference in Moscow, Lavrov ruled out holding the next round of talks in the Vatican, noting that it would be not very elegant for the Vatican to host the talks between two Orthodox nations. He said Russia is working on a memorandum related to the military campaign, which will focus on eliminating its root causes. Lavrov repeated President Vladimir Putin's claims that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky lost legitimacy after his term expired last year, but emphasized that Russia is open to contacts with him and his administration to reach agreements on the settlement principles. When it comes to signing, that's where the issue of legitimacy will be of decisive importance, because if it's signed by those whose legitimacy is dubious, their successors could challenge the agreement, Lavrov claimed.